we can reframe that to deciding that we can view failure as a learning opportunity and a growth opportunity. When we do that, we can actually practice more self-compassion and self-forgiveness because we just remind ourselves, oh, I can be kind to myself, I can be gentle with myself because this is the normal part of the process of achieving success. Hi, and welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast, episode number 98. So today on the podcast, I want us to talk about failure and why we should embrace failing. I've been thinking a lot about this, especially as, we set goals for the new year, goals for our relationships, personal goals, career goals, health goals, whatever goals you may have in mind. And just a disclaimer, I woke up today with some weird raspiness in my voice, but I'm determined to get this episode to you this week, so please bear with me. Just bear with my raspy voice. We have a joke in Kenya when somebody is singing. We say, listen to the words and not the sound, and not the voice. So I'm going to encourage you to just listen to the sound, the voice. Oh my gosh, I can't even think of it. Listen to the words and not the voice. All right. So on today's episode, what I want to talk about is why embracing failure is actually important for success. So we're going to talk a little bit about failure and how we look at failure. We're going to talk about just a little bit about what failure really is, the benefits of failure, embracing failure and resilience, and just to kind of touch on that. Hey, Mama, you deserve a life free of overwhelm and burnout. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. I'm your host, life and mindset coach, Shiro Bergbauer. I'm also a wife, mom, and CRNA. This is the podcast for high-achieving mamas in medicine like you and I. Together, we'll learn how to navigate the ups and downs of working motherhood. If you're looking to thrive in your relationships and overcome overwhelm in your motherhood, marriage, and medicine, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. What actually is failure? And as you know, I like the Merriam-Webster definitions. So failure, according to, actually today we're going to use the Oxford Dictionary. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, there's a couple of definitions of failure. One is a lack of success, and two is the omission of expected or required action. So I want you to think about like when you set a goal and you decide that you have failed at the goal, usually it's when we're describing that we didn't succeed at the goal or we didn't meet the expectation. One of the interesting things to think about is really when we set goals, do we sometimes kind of think about the possibility of the obstacles that would get in the way that would result in failure? And I will tell you that sometimes when people say to me, I feel like a failure, it makes me wonder if they actually understand what the meaning of failure is, because if you're saying you feel like you haven't met expectations, then the question goes to whose expectations? Whose expectations are you supposed to be meeting in order to be a failure, right? So that's the first thing I want us to think about. So one is I want us to think about the importance of embracing failure for our professional and personal growth. And in order to do that, like, let's think about different ways in which failure can manifest in our life. So last week we talked about relationship goals, and what I offered you is like, what is the emotion you want to feel towards your partner? And when you evaluate it, how you can maybe realize is if you're succeeding at it is, are you feeling that emotion? Is the result that you're trying to create, are you receiving that result or are you not receiving it? Now let's go to like a goal, like a weight loss goal or a fitness goal. The way that can manifest is if you set a timeline and you're like, I want to lose 5 pounds in 3 months. And at the end of the 3 months, you evaluate and you've lost 0 pounds. Then you can then say, well, I failed at the goal. And then professionally, it could be, you set a goal. Maybe you are going to get a promotion this year, and that's a goal, and then you don't get the promotion. So that can be maybe perceived as a failure. Now, one of the things, like I said, when people say, I feel like a failure, I think what most of the time people are referring to is actually the common reactions to failure, which is usually one or a combination of the following. It could be shame, it could be guilt, it could be avoidance. And so if you are looking at a model, when the person has a thought that I failed and they feel shame or they feel guilt or they feel avoidance, then they show up in a way that reflects those emotions. If you want to think about like just shame, right? And looking at going back to definitions, we've talked about this before on the podcast where people sometimes confuse shame and guilt. And really, shame is, as a description, a painful feeling of humiliation or distress that's caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. Or it's like shame is us saying I'm bad or I'm failing versus I did something bad, which is guilt. And then guilt is more of I did something bad or I didn't meet my goal, right? And that is the fact of having committed a specific or implied offense, right? Or quote unquote a crime. And then avoidance is just when instead of like being open about what has happened, you kind of pretend that it didn't happen. So it's the action of keeping away from or not doing something, or just going about your business like it didn't happen. Or when people ask you about the goal, you maybe may feel some embarrassment and maybe perceive that they think that you're a failure. Although you as a person, it's highly unlikely that you are a failure, right? Now you can fail, but that doesn't make you a failure. So one of the things for most of us, that we look at failure as something that we must avoid at all costs. And we also see it as a sign of weakness or a lack of ability. But the honest truth is failure is an inevitable part of life. It's something that we all experience no matter how successful we are. And if we think about it, failure is actually a launching pad sometimes for us to get to the next big thing. And when I think about how we treat failure, I often think like in anesthesia, for example, right? A mistake or failure could result in the loss of life or, untoward events in anesthesia. So, of course, that is an environment in which failing is definitely not even, there's no room for that, right? But the problem that I see, and I see this in many of my clients, is that they take that mindset of, we're not allowed to fail. Something terrible could happen if we fail. And we extrapolate that into real life. So, for example, it's like if we have decided we show up a certain way in our parenting or in our relationship, if we don't do that, then it's like, oh my gosh, I have failed. And we treat it with the same depth as if we would have failed in taking care of somebody and resulting in a loss of life or resulting in the patient getting in the ICU. So I want to offer you, when you look at failing, I want you to just like be able to separate the two. Be able to be okay with making mistakes outside of the operating room, because we are so failure averse as a profession. But when we extrapolate that into our real life, it actually makes us like exist as robots. Okay. So now that we've talked about like just the understanding of failure, let's talk about the benefits of failing. And these include the learning opportunities that failure presents, right? Because failing can be a very valuable tool for personal and professional growth. So, I was thinking like when we think about the opportunities that learning presents, it really allows us to identify our areas of improvement and also the areas that we're not strong at, our weak areas. It also helps us, again, in that evaluating to understand what doesn't work and what needs to be changed. Because when we embrace failure, we can then start learning from our mistakes. And we can use that knowledge to then grow and improve as individuals. Another benefit of embracing failure is that it can help us develop a growth mindset. Now, a growth mindset is the belief that we can improve and grow through effort and learning. So when we view failure as an opportunity to learn and grow, we actually build that resilience muscle, and we're better able to handle adversity. The other thing is we sometimes have this fantastical idea of what like success in creating optimal results looks like. And the honest truth is you have to fail many times as part of the process of achieving success. So many successful people have failed multiple times before they achieve their goal. The difference between the people who fail and quit is that the people who fail and keep going succeed, right? So if you fail and quit, then you just fail. But if you fail and keep going, eventually you find success. So, and I don't know if this is a story, if it's a true story. So I actually want to fact check it, but I did. I just fact checked it, and the 409 cleaner story, right, is this the name. If you ever used 409, you know it's this cleaner. It's a household cleaner, and the legend has it that these individuals basically tried over and over and over and over again to create this formula. And they were young men from Detroit, and they just kept trying. They were from Michigan. They kept trying and they kept trying. And the company claims that it was the 409th time that they basically created this compound that they were able to succeed. And so imagine trying something, implementing it, failing, getting up, getting it done again 409 times. And that in itself is a descriptor of just the tenacity, right? Like you come up with a product, you create the product, and you're like, I'm going to just keep trying until I finally get it right. So many, like we've heard so many stories of inventors, creators, multiple people. Like I think sometimes what happens, especially when we view success, I like to describe it as being on the end, like of a marathon or a half marathon. And you're standing there and you see these runners and they're like so excited and they're jubilant and they're about to hit the finish line. What we see is the success, right? What we don't see is at mile marker 5 where they wanted to quit. What we don't see at mile marker 10 when they had a Charlie horse and they kept going. So when we think about success, I think sometimes we see the end result and we assume that the work was easy and seamless and like, why is it easy for other people? What I want to offer you is the truth is, even in marriage, even in personal relationship, you will have those experiences where you don't achieve the goal in the time frame that you want. And one of the biggest like tips I got from my mentor, Brig Johnson, who's also a life coach, she's also my life coach too, is like, what if you just got the timeline wrong? Like, what if instead of saying, oh, it's a loss, it's a fail, it's like, okay, I said I was going to achieve this thing in 6 months and it's been 6 months and I'm not even halfway there. What if you just tell yourself, oh, it's just a timeline. I set the goal. I can get to it. So that growth mindset is really like key in helping us just like get to what we want to achieve. The other thing is how do we then embrace failure? When we embrace failure, we could do it by just reframing our perception of failure. So instead of like deciding that failure is a negative thing, we can reframe that to deciding that we can view failure as a learning opportunity and a growth opportunity. When we do that, we can actually practice more self-compassion and self-forgiveness because we just remind ourselves, oh, I can be kind to myself. I can be gentle with myself because this is the normal part of process of achieving success. Another way, like I said, embracing failure does help us have a growth mindset. But another way of actually embracing it is to just develop a growth mindset. So we can do this by learning to focus on learning and growth rather than avoiding failure. So many people will say, I'm afraid of failing, but really it's like the initial failure to launch is this thing that they're scared of because they're afraid, like, what if I make this big move and it doesn't succeed? So we can actually start to practice and build our resilience muscle by finding ways to cope with failure and learning from failure to become stronger. So failure is really just always going to be a part of our life. It's going to be a part of our existence. And, we have to be willing to just open our minds to that. We have to be willing to see how we can use failure to build resilience. Now, if you think about like when we embrace failure, and we build that resilience, it creates our ability to bounce back from adversity. Again, we can develop that resilience because now we don't view failure as a personal weakness. We just reframe it into a learning opportunity because it's normal part of the growth process. And by viewing it as a step towards success, it really just that creates that step forward in the direction that we want to go. When we practice self-compassion and in order to develop resilience and coping with failure, we are kind and we understand an understanding towards ourselves when we experience perceived failure. So, the components of self-compassion are self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And so being in the present moment and realizing, oh, other people do fail too, it doesn't mean anything negative about me. It's just a part of the process. And when we focus on what we can control really, and when we can evaluate and develop that resilience, we, instead of dwelling on what is going wrong, we can focus on what we can control. So we go back in that evaluation process and we evaluate what worked well, right? What didn't work and what do we want to do different? So when we do that, we can feel more in control of the situation and create more empowerment, because when we are deciding on focusing on dwelling on what's wrong, the emotion that may come up is, we can feel helpless. Right? And then when we're helpless, we don't take action. But when we feel like we're empowered and we're in charge, then we're more likely to take positive action and momentum action. So the other thing that we can focus on is asking for help and seeking support. So don't be afraid to reach out to your friends, your mentors, your family, even your therapist or coach when you're struggling with perceived failure, because talking to that person can help you process your feelings and maybe just speak out your thoughts out loud so you can see where your blind spots are, and it gives you a different perspective of the situation. The other thing is really believing that failure can be a valuable teacher. So if you take time to reflect in the evaluation process to see what went wrong, right, you can then decide the next time. And this helps you avoid repeating the same mistakes over and over. The other thing is, once you learn from your failure, you can get back to your routine and focus on the present. So sometimes when we get so caught up in failure and ruminating, we actually stay stuck. So allowing yourself to keep going and keep making steps in a positive direction is actually more helpful for you than focusing on the actual failure. Remember, if you fail at something or if you don't meet a goal, take care of yourself. Take care of your physical health, your mental health, practice self-care, and take care of yourself so you can cope with the stress of just that mindset of feeling like things are not working out for you. Last but not least, be willing to have a positive perspective towards how that failure can help you lurch forward. And again, it's okay to feel disappointment. It's okay to feel dissatisfied. What's not okay is to make that perceived failure mean anything negative about you. When you don't take a stand for your highest self to be okay, I didn't meet a goal. Now, how do I get forward instead stay focusing on what didn't work, you really don't make any progress. You really can't move forward and create the results that you want. So, in summary, we talked about the importance of embracing failure for personal and professional growth. And what I want to encourage you is to embrace failure as a valuable tool that will help you learn and grow as a person. I want to invite you to just notice the areas in your life where you maybe in the result, you didn't achieve the result that you want, and make the decision to make that experience a learning experience. And in no way am I saying everything happens for a reason type thinking, but more okay, I didn't meet a certain goal. I didn't meet a certain plan. What can I learn from this? What do I want to bring with me in the future? And how can I make this a way to adapt and keep going in the future to set the goals that I want to have? So again, I just hope that from this episode, what I really wanted to take away from is that if there's something in your life where you feel like, oh, I don't want to start it because I don't want to fail, like hopefully this episode gives you a reason to be like, oh, failing is not that big bad monster. It's just a part of the process. It's part of the playing the long game, is that there will be failures. There will be times when you don't meet goals, and it doesn't mean anything negative about you. I know this episode was short and sweet, part of by reason of my voice and all of that, and I hope that this clears out. It's been a crazy fall for those of you with little kids. You know, they're bringing all the viruses home. We just started back in school, so that's expected. But yeah, I really wanted to bring this episode out to you because I've just been seeing it a lot in my coaching clients where they're like, oh, I don't want to start this new thing because I don't want to fail. I don't want to ask for this thing because I don't want to fail. And I just want us to be like willing to see failure as just part of the process, right? Life is 50-50. Failing is part of life. Like, we're going to have moments of disappointment, but we're also going to have moments of great joy and gratitude and appreciation. But we can't get to our goals if it's like this smooth sailing. Like, success isn't this linear path. Like, there will be ups and downs, and failing is just part of it. And when you're going through a perceived failure, like, don't talk yourself out of it. Like, be willing to sit with the disappointment. Be willing to sit with the shame or the guilt or, you know, whatever emotion comes up. Be willing to sit with this, but don't attribute that emotion to mean anything negative about you. You are awesome. You are worthy. You are worthy of love and belonging. And what you achieve in this world doesn't take that away or add to it. So thank you again for tuning in. My apologies for the voice. Thank you for tolerating it. And I hope to talk to you next week. Have a great week. Bye. I'm Shira Bergbauer, and you've been listening to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. New episodes are out every Monday. These episodes are created by me, Shira Bergbauer, and produced by Cassidy Mitchell. If you enjoyed this show or found it helpful, please rate it and review us on Apple Podcasts. If the concepts I share on this podcast resonate with you, or you're ready to change your relationships and mindset, I can help you. If you'd like in-depth, personalized support, I'd love to invite you to apply for my Life and Mindset coaching program. Just imagine you and I every week working together as I teach you the tools to up-level your life. To book your free 1-hour consultation call, go to www.stethoscopestoswaddles.com/consultation. You're doing a great job, Mama. Have a great week. Bye now.